Hello, my friends, and welcome back to the Blessed Podcast. My guest today, Maria Begonia Garcia, says things and events in themselves are neither good nor bad. They are neutral. We assign the meaning to everything, and that involves our choices. For example, you can react to a situation or you can respond to it. And today we're going to talk about the choices that Maria has made in her life that have made her successful. And that her story was one of grace and determination. She responded to the circumstances of her life, and this has paved the way for her positive mindset and living a life of thriving, despite a debilitating stroke at the age of only 25. Maria and her family came to the United States from Spain when she was 7 years old, and her life was a series of beautiful synchronicities until one day, after a family dinner, she started talking gibberish and she got a crushing headache. And no one thinks that they can have a stroke at 25. In fact, Maria never even heard the word before. Her recovery is miraculous and her lessons are profound. What may have caused her stroke is even more important to discuss. The only risk factor she had was her birth control. Did you know that clotting was a side effect? And we don't think about the risks of something so common, but maybe we should start paying more attention to reading those package inserts. And after many years of working with various healing methodologies and doctors and therapies, Maria found that the one thing that supercharged her recovery was her nutrition. So we're going to talk a lot about food and all of these things. We're going to get into all of it today because there's some really important things to discuss that are considered maybe a little controversial, but we're going to jump into it because these are things people need to know in order to live their best lives. Welcome, Maria Garcia. I love how your name rhymes so beautifully, to the Blessings Podcast.
Thank you for having me, and I look forward to our conversation.
Yes, me too. So I want to begin with a quote from your memoir. You said that you love the term inverse paranoid because this is someone who thinks that the world is conspiring to do him good in every situation. So what did you come away with after the experience of your stroke that you were able to see good in that very difficult experience?
Okay, first I will say that I was in a place where I did not want to live for a long time, and I was in that why me stage for a while. But finally, when things changed for me, I would tell people, and I say it to this day, I would not go through that experience again, but I wouldn't change it because it's who I am. It's what changed my mind, set, everything.
Yeah. So how old are you now?
I'll be 47.
So you'll be 47, and this happened when you were 25. So I want to go back and just talk a little bit about your life before you had the stroke, which was really a defining moment. It's characterized basically your whole life and your whole adult life and taught you so many beautiful things that I want to get into all of it. But let me understand, let the audience understand what your life was like before. So you grew up in Spain, and in your book, you talk about it so charmingly as this really small village where you might not even see a cow pulling a cart go by in the course of your day. It was so rural. So tell us a little bit about where you grew up and your childhood before you came to the United States.
That was such a beautiful time. We lived near the ocean. We lived in a tiny village, and everybody was family, basically, because everybody took care of you. Everybody knew you, and the kids were basically outside. When there wasn't school, the kids were outside all day long.
And that's such a beautiful way to grow up. I grew up in very much the same way where I would spend the day outside. And I think there's so much to be said for that. So all that time that you spent outside and being a part of this true community as a child, what do you think that gave you? What kind of gifts did you get from that upbringing that may have helped you later on when you needed strength?
Oh, that's a good question. The importance of community and just having people around, having people who show up for you. Because if it wasn't for my family when the stroke happened, I would not be here.
Yeah. And I did read that you were extremely grateful for the support of your family. In fact, you said that when you were in the hospital that you were never alone. They took shifts and made sure that you were never alone.
That makes me want to cry when I think about it. It was so incredibly.
I mean, that would be something I would wish for everyone, to have a family like that, a support system, and the importance of family and the values of that thing. It seems to me that because your family originated from a place where community was so important, that this was a natural value that maybe even was part of their genetic makeup.
Yeah, I think that's right.
Yeah. And it is something I think we're getting away from. There are a lot of people who don't grow up with that.
Yeah, I think in the States, at least in the cities, you do not get anything like that. It's people are isolated. I barely even know my neighbors.
Yeah. Do you find that's one of the biggest things you noticed when you came to the United States, even as a child?
Yeah, that was a huge difference for me because I moved to a city and nobody knew anybody. We were never outside.
So it was a drastic change in your lifestyle.
Huge, huge. It was night and day.
Yeah. In the book, you wrote that it took you over a year to get used to it. What kinds of things did you do that helped you to acclimate to a brand new society that was so different from where you grew up?
I think that's when I started taking on coping mechanisms and masks and stuff.
Okay. These coping mechanisms, what kinds of things would you do specifically? Can you give some examples?
I made myself small. I became a people pleaser.
You're actually a small, I'm 5'2" and you're 5'2", so we're the same height. So I can understand the literal being small, and then that kind of lends itself to being able to fade in to the background if you don't want to be seen. I think in my case, I would have to make myself very loud. I would be silly or do things to make myself seen more. But on the other hand, it is easy to also disappear if you want to.
Very.
Yes. Okay. Now, you mentioned that as you were growing up, that when you got into college, that you found yourself. So you may have slipped into the background and gone into some of those coping mechanisms as you were younger. But when you got into college, you seemed to find yourself a little bit more. Can you talk about the transition and what kind of personality you were able to embody once you got into college?
When I went to college, that was the first time that I was away from my family. And I basically got to learn who I was without them. And it was a great time. I had a really great time in college. I became more outspoken.
You became more outspoken and you became more adventurous. You definitely describe yourself as someone who enjoys a party.
Oh, yeah.
So tell us about that, Maria. What was she like then?
The sad thing is that I wanted to drink, or I enjoyed drinking a lot. And the reason I enjoyed it so much is because I felt like when I was drunk, I could drop the masks. So I basically partied every weekend.
Yeah.
I was playing hard.
And so when you're living that lifestyle as a young adult in your early 20s, it can be extremely freeing. I remember tapping into that feeling myself. I loved it when I got to college, and I realized I can go out and I can drink as much as I want, and I don't even have to go home if I don't want to. It was something that dawned on me, like, I am completely free.
Same young.
Yeah. So you first experienced that total freedom of living as who you felt was your authentic self.
Yeah.
Yes. And it's interesting because you said something in your book that I thought was very telling. You said that teachers think that it's the parents' job to develop a child's self-esteem, and parents think that it's the teacher's job to develop the child's self-esteem. But it's really our job to develop our own self-esteem. And the early 20s is the time when this typically takes place. Can you talk a little bit about that journey for you?
For me, my self-esteem had been knocked down basically with the move with my grandma's death, with my mom leaving me in Spain to visit my dad in America a couple of times alone. And so I basically had zero self-esteem. And the self-esteem was slowly built, like you said, in my 20s, just by becoming more myself, just by having that. The ties with my family weren't there. I wasn't in their lives all the time because I went to college away. It was just like that, breaking free and becoming myself.
It is such an interesting pattern because being younger, having this extremely strong bond to community and to your family, coming to a brand new country where things were completely different, and again, relying on your family, but disappearing into that, and then finally breaking free of it in your early 20s. And you talk about how life can lead you to beautiful places if you just let it flow. and you ended up at some point wanting to go to Germany, and you went there without a plan. You just went with money in your pocket to survive for a certain amount of time, but no plan at all. And you ended up meeting people and falling into luck. And so talk a little bit about that story and what happens when you have the confidence, you develop the self-esteem, and you learn to let life take the wheel a little bit. How was that for you?
That was such an exciting and freeing experience. I remember I had graduated college, and I thought to myself, I don't want to go to work right away and just be part of the grind. I want to go to Europe and learn a second language, or rather,
A third
language. And I figured Germany sounds good because the euro is based on the mark, and I studied finance. So maybe one day it'll all work out. And so I bought a ticket, round trip, in case I had to come back. And I went, like you said, with money in my pocket, and everything just fell into place. I found somewhere to live right away. People were helping me. I found a job pretty much right away. It was amazing. I think it was probably one of the best times I've ever had in my life. And I ended up staying there 3 years.
3 years. And you attributed that to the concept of not worrying. So you were able to release worry. And as a result, good things came your way. Do you see that as like a universal concept?
I think it is. And I think that ties into being an inverse paranoid and looking for the silver lining in everything that happens. And I think when you don't worry, because worry is negative goal setting, right? And if you worry, that's what you're attracting. But if you just let go, things just seem to go in flow.
They do. And they say worrying is like praying for what you don't want. Yeah. It reminds me of Michael Singer's book, The Surrender Experiment, where he says yes to everything, basically, for a period of time. And it leads him to amazing, wonderful success. So very interesting. So you studied finance in school. You ended up working as a waitress a lot in your early life, but then you did end up getting a stockbroker's license, and you were employed with a firm, and your life was going very well. And so then things took a turn at about this point. So can you tell us the story of what happened the night that you had the family dinner and everything changed on a dime?
Yes. So I lived in the same house as my parents, but they lived in one apartment and I lived in the other. It's a 2-level house or 2-family house. So anyway, we had a brunch at their house. And it was a brunch, a late lunch dinner. And afterward, I went down to my apartment and I was speaking with somebody who lives in England. And all of a sudden I started talking gibberish, like the red ocean is underneath the kitchen floor. And I heard myself say it, and I'm like, what was that? I couldn't believe I said it. I felt like I was watching somebody else say it. And it stopped me, and I got scared. And then I said another gibberish thing, and I was like, okay, something's wrong here. So I managed to get off the phone somehow. And as soon as I got off the phone, I felt like somebody went, whack, cast iron pan to the head. And I fell onto my bed in the fetal position, and I was feeling really ill. And my friend happened to be in the living room because we had all eaten together, and he was still hanging out with me. And so he noticed commotion, and he came in the room, and he saw that I was lying in bed, all crunched. He must have called my mom. She came down. The ambulance was called. They came. They didn't think I was having a stroke, of course, even though my face was starting to droop one side. So they left. They actually left. And I ended up at the hospital a few hours later. After a few tests, somebody walks over to me and says, Miss, we think you're having a stroke. And I was like, all right, so much for food poisoning. But what's a stroke? I had no idea what that was. Within 24 hours, I had been transferred to a different hospital, and I had now lost all ability to move or talk. So it was basically individuated but conscious.
Wow. Okay. So there's a lot to unpack there. Originally, they thought you were having food poisoning. And when you finally did get diagnosed with a stroke, it was hours later. And by that time, then you had lost all of your ability to speak, to move at all. And so did everyone think that you were not really conscious? Were they aware that you could understand and that you knew what was going on?
No, it was for probably 2 weeks that they thought I was not conscious. Meanwhile, I'm hearing everything. I'm seeing things. It was a friend of mine who first noticed I was conscious because she brought in pictures of a trip we took together. And she noticed me tracking plan. So she alerted the staff, who said, no, that's involuntary. It's unbelievable. But
Wow.
I guess she also told my family at the time, and they were the ones that said, blink once for yes, twice for no. And that's all the first communication with outside world.
Wow. Wow. So for 2 weeks, you were lying there trapped in your own body.
Basically.
And did you hear any conversations about you that were disturbing? Like, what were they saying about you?
I'm going back in that time period. That was I can't even say it was terrifying because that's not the right qualifier, the right intensity. But yeah, I did hear some things like organ donation people speaking to my family and things like that.
Wow. Oh my gosh, that is terrifying. In your book, you said that a doctor came in at one point, and in order to prove that you were not conscious, he pinched your leg really hard, and you could feel all of the sensations of pain. You felt the feeding tube. You felt the nurse moving your mouth around and cleaning your tongue, and a lot of callous kind of movements that the medical staff were performing on you, thinking that you had no sensation, that you were a vegetable in essence, and you weren't. What was that like for you?
I felt like a piece of, I don't know, like a nothing, like a sack of potatoes.
Trapped in there and feeling pain, feeling emotional pain, physical pain, understanding everything cognitively. You had no cognitive impairment at all. So that's insane. And in your book, you describe the way that you were crying out inside to God and saying, why is this happening to me? What does this mean for the rest of my life? Not having any idea if you would ever regain the ability to communicate or let people know that you were really inside of there.
At that time, I just wanted to die.
I can't even imagine how difficult that must have been for you. And it's making me think, first of all, gratitude to you for expressing it and letting us know that this is a real thing that happens to people. And it also makes me wonder how many people have experienced this and are, when we think that they're not there, that they're really there.
Yeah, and I've heard this story more than once.
Wow. So were they measuring your brain activity at the time?
I have no idea.
That's interesting, because you would think they would be able to see that your brain was working, but they wrote you off until your friend noticed that your eyes were moving, and then your family said, oh, yes, she is there. And they were able to start communicating with you. Thank God, finally. Amazing. And what ended up happening, I read, is that you had a 5 millimeter clot, and you had a procedure done that caused your body to begin to heal, basically. And it was a procedure that a lot of people don't recover from. A lot of people don't survive it. And it has a very low recovery rate. And you were hearing all this information before you could communicate. And yet you were a person who responded to the treatment, was able to recover. So what does it feel like in terms of your ability to have belief that you can heal?
I think a lot of what helped me recover is that I had no idea what a stroke was. I didn't have any reference. And so I never, at that time, thought that my life was really in danger. It was only when I spoke with my brother and he told me about the procedure and what that had meant. Because that part I did not hear. At that point, it was still within the very beginning. And I thought to myself, okay, I'm going to be in the hospital maybe 2 weeks. And then I'll go home and I'll be all perfect. That's what I believe.
But believing that helped you to be a survivor. And it helps you to understand why people can be told that they have a certain amount of time to live, or that a condition is going to cause them to not survive, or that something is terminal. And they can also be told the opposite, that, oh, this is nothing. We're going to get rid of this for you and you'll be on your way. Even if it's something serious, there's the placebo effect. So being told one way or the other can become a self-fulfilling prophecy.
Oh, absolutely. And that's why it makes me frustrated in a way that in today's medical world, people are told things like, you have 3 months to live. No, you don't tell people that. At least when I was living in Spain, they never told people stuff like that. They would tell the family.
But not the patient. Yeah, I think that's a very interesting phenomenon. I know there have been studies on this where people have been told they have a certain amount of time to live, and then they end up passing in that time. And is it because they were told that? Or is it because now the doctors can look at that information and say, we know that if you have X disease, this is going to be the outcome because it happens. But why does it happen? Does it happen because they're told that? So it's very interesting to think about that. And I wonder if we looked at places where they don't regularly tell the patients that, like maybe if they're still doing that in Spain, it would be interesting to study health outcomes.
Yeah, the problem is I think they're basically doing it worldwide now.
They're doing it now. They're they're predicting your demise for you.
Basically.
Oh, that is so interesting. So your recovery was very long and arduous. You were 43 days in the hospital ultimately, and then another several months, 2 months in inpatient rehab, and then many months to years in outpatient. Okay, so years. And you were doing all kinds of different things. So I know you talked about in the book, you talked about acupuncture, which I love as a healing tool. I use acupuncture and I find it very effective. And you talked about other things like hyperbaric oxygen and therapies like this. So what kinds of things, before you found something that like really worked, what kinds of things were helping you move the needle, even if just a little bit in the early days?
I think everything was doing so many things at the same time that it's hard to pinpoint exactly what was helping more. But I think everything pretty much helped me to a certain degree.
Okay. But you were still struggling. So you were improving little by little. You were regaining your speech, you're regaining your movement. And this happened incrementally over time. And all these therapies were adding up to help, which is amazing. And then after a certain number of years, you just discovered fairly recently that if you tweaked something about your diet and your nutritional intake, that it was a game changer. So I also found for my health, I think we talked about this, that I have a histamine intolerance issue, and it is through food that I control it, basically, food and supplements. I had an interview with Dr. Terry Walls, the multiple sclerosis expert. She also has a nutritional protocol that heals multiple sclerosis. So when you're talking about a stroke, you're talking about neurological damage, and the nervous system is largely affected. So how are you eating now? What did you find out about your food? And what did it do to spark more improvement than you ever saw before?
I also want to preface this by saying that I was doing so many things. I even did stem cells.
Oh, yeah, stem cells.
From a different country, because in America it's really expensive. Cost prohibitive.
Yeah. And of course, not covered by insurance, which is that's a whole other rabbit hole we could go down.
That's why I ended up going home after 2 months, because my insurance wouldn't pay for any more time.
Crazy.
And meanwhile, I get home and I'm not walking. I'm wearing diapers.
And they sent you home.
They sent me home.
Yeah. Okay. We'll get back to the food question, but I think the point here is that you had to become your own advocate. You had to heal yourself, is basically the premise you're saying, right?
Yes. Totally correct.
Okay. So healing yourself meant constant research, constant trying, constant investigating, and finally figuring out something with your food. So tell me about what you did. What did you do with your food? What did you stop eating? What did you start eating?
Okay, so through the years in my recovery, food was something I also used as a tool. In the beginning, I was macro, then I went to pescatarian, then I went to vegetarian, because we've been told that being a vegetarian is healthier. I understand some people do it for other reasons, but I was doing it for health. And I believed it was healthy. 15 years after I had the stroke, I changed my diet, which is already good, by the way. And I put it in air quotes because what we are told is good and we believe is good for us is not. And so I started eating meat again. That was one of the major things. And I didn't eat a lot of sugar, but I removed the rest of the sugars that were maybe hidden that I didn't know about, and also removed most grains.
What about dairy?
Dairy is not something that I recommend, although once in a blue moon, like once a month or so, I'll have a Greek yogurt or something.
Okay, so generally you don't eat dairy. I find that I can eat goat's milk dairy, goat cheese, I have some goat cheese, but I don't eat it that much. And I will eat goat butter if I need to have butter, but which is rare, like once a week, once every 2 weeks or something like that. Interesting. So from adding meat back in, removing grains, removing dairy, basically, you saw an improvement from this?
I recovered 20% more. I got my life back.
Wow.
I actually got my life back.
That's amazing. Do you attribute it to any particular thing? Do you think it was more the grains, needing the protein?
I think it was a combination of things.
Yeah.
I think also up my hydration, which I think is very important as well.
And you recovered another 20%.
2 years after a stroke. 15.
That's crazy. So do you drink? No alcohol. Yeah.
I used to drink Baileys every once in a while, like maybe once a month. Because drinking became not fun. A few drinks closer to the beginning would just make my speech even more slurred. I was like, this sucks.
Yeah, it loses its luster when you realize the health ramifications. And I know I felt the same way about drinking. Interesting. Okay. So food is really medicine, and what we eat is really important. And I want to go back to something you said. You said you were eating, quote, healthy before, but what we are told is healthy, like vegetarianism or whatnot, isn't necessarily healthy for everyone. And I think it can be very individualistic. I know people who swear by being vegans, and I know other people who swear by carnivore diet. I think that we have to look at our own individual needs and be able to tune in to our intuition in what really is working for us. So how did you know what to eat, what not to eat, like intuitively? And how was that? How did you make the connection between what was making you feel better, how you were seeing improvement, and whatnot? Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, so this is the way I look at it. Humans are the species Homo sapiens. That species, just like a giraffe, it's a species, or an elephant species. And as a species, we all have similar nutritional requirements that must be met in order to be healthy. The reason that different things work for different people is because think of health as on a spectrum. Some people are really healthy, and some people are very not healthy, and everywhere in between. So somebody who maybe has an allergy to certain food, and there's somebody else who doesn't, that's only because they're on a different part of the spectrum, not because the physiology is different.
That's a good way of looking at it. And I think that a lot of people they'll do an elimination diet and then they'll experiment and work with what's feeling good. But I have to say, for me, it wasn't until I actually had some testing done where a functional medicine doctor, could look at the different vitamin levels in my body and what I was absorbing from my food and what I was not absorbing because of inflammation and different factors in your body, like you're saying, the spectrum. And that's why everybody's different. But you can actually test for this. You can, and our medical system, the traditional doctors, they don't think it's necessary, or they're treating just the symptoms. But when you see the right person who understands that it has to do with the pathways and things in your body and what you're absorbing and what's necessary for you to feel your best and to have optimal functioning, not have certain symptoms, and this is related. It's interesting. So did you ever have anything tested to see supplement wise or like vitamins?
That I did not. I didn't have it. Oh, actually, I was told I have a bit of a vitamin D deficiency.
Okay.
It was apparent because when I got COVID, I ended up a little bit more sick than I thought I would have been.
I love that you were able to recover more and that you're finding food helpful. And I think that's extremely important. Let's go back and talk a little bit about why this happened. I'm sure you asked yourself a million times, and I know you said you were asking God why this happened to you. And there are probably two answers to that. So one answer had to do with what actually caused it in your body. And one answer probably has to do with your purpose and why you're here on this earth. So let's talk about both. The only thing that medically they were able to find was that you were on birth control, and it was listed, stroke is listed, clotting is listed as a side effect that we don't normally think about because it's pretty rare, but it does happen. Did you do any research into this and find out more about the birth control connection?
Not really. Actually, the pill that I was on increased the risk threefold over other birth control. That I did find out. And there was the beginnings of a lawsuit, of a mass lawsuit that ended up dying out because the birth control that I was taking was birth control that I got on when I lived in Germany. So it didn't really work for the lawsuit in America.
Oh, that's too bad. But you came to find out that this birth control pill had a 3 times more risk.
But when I went to the doctor, they never told me, hey, you could have a stroke.
Crazy. And you're living proof that it does happen, unfortunately. But it's good to spread awareness. It's good to spread awareness about it. But then this leads us to the larger kind of existential question of why do you think this happened to you? What were you supposed to learn from this? And in turn, then teach others in the world. What do you think is your purpose for this having happened?
I think my inner children were screaming that they needed help, and I wasn't listening. So eventually they're like, really? That was my lesson to learn. And now with what I found out in my process, I could help millions of people that are interested in recovering their health.
A big part of your recovery was in your mindset work and your mental health. This is my jam. This is what I talk about, is the mindset work. And you and I have read a lot of the same books that have impacted us, and you've been involved in many programs that have contributed to your awakening. And so do you think you would have tapped into the importance of mindset work and how that helps the spirit to awaken to possibility and potential if this had not happened to you?
Absolutely not. That's actually a great statement, because I probably would not have gone down this path at all. The path I was on was the path of drinking and partying. And it's funny because I once met somebody who did a reading, right? And she said, oh, the guru says that you have some type of brain injury. And I'm thinking, all right, genius. Anybody can tell I have a brain injury because when I met her, it was not long after the stroke and I still had many deficiencies. But then she said something interesting. She said, and he says that you have a metal piece in your brain. And I'm like, all right, that you cannot see. I have a stent.
Oh.
I have a stent. And then she also said, and the guru says that you went down this path to prevent you from going down a worse path.
That just gave me the goosebumps. And that's true, that when something happens in our lives and we might interpret it as bad, but going back to what you said in the beginning, everything is neutral. It's the meaning we give it, but we interpret it as good or bad because that's what we do as humans. But really, it was preventing us from going down a worse path. I love that. Oh my gosh. So you learned a lot about yourself and you learned a lot about life and what's really important. And one of the things that you talked about was confidence, self-confidence. How did you get your confidence back after the stroke?
Wow. Very slowly. I already had probably close to neutral amount of confidence, like very low confidence, before the stroke. Then after the stroke, I had negative confidence. Now I just wanted to totally disappear. It was very challenging. And I think a lot of it was over time with all the things I was doing. And I think what gave me the most confidence is eating the food that nourish my body.
Because that, when you eat foods that nourish you and empower you, that is a form of taking control of your life.
Yes, it's a form of self-care.
It's self-love. It's taking control. It's taking control of your healing and your health and your wellness. Like, we have control. That is the thing I found out, is that we are in control of our own healing. So for you, how do you feel about that? You saw all kinds of doctors, you did all kinds of things, but ultimately, how are you healing?
I healed myself, but the medical profession, they were putting Band-Aids on the things that were happening with my physical body, but it was just Band-Aids.
That's right. Just Band-Aids. Even if you think about it, like, just logically, if you think about it, even if a doctor gives you a pill that helps you with something, it's taking place in your body. It's your body that's metabolizing that pill and making it work. It's not the doctor. Yes, sometimes we have prescriptions and things, but sometimes they don't work. And sometimes they give us a sugar pill and that works. And that's because it's your body. It's inside of you. We are miracle machines. If you cut your finger, you can rest assured that if it's just a tiny cut, it's probably going to be gone within 24, 48 hours, because we are healers. We are self-healers. And even when something like what happened to you with this stroke, you are healing and you have healed. So where would you put yourself on the spectrum of healing?
It's other than this sexy voice that I have, pretty much, and I don't run it yet because of an ankle injury that's secondary to the stroke that is taking longer to heal than normally would. But other than that, I feel like I'm pretty much in good health.
So the only residual signs that you have are in your voice.
Pretty much.
You mentioned, and I'm not going to remember the name of the condition, when your speech isn't catching up to your brain.
I think it's aphasia.
Yes. Yes. Do you still have that? Aphasia? Is that what it is?
There was a couple of them. There was aphasia, there's apraxia.
Apraxia. That's the one it is. It's apraxia.
Yeah. Do I saw that? No, I don't think so.
No.
Or now, like back then, not even noticeable to me.
Yeah. So you just got lucky enough to now have a sexy voice. I love it.
Yeah.
Have you got any recordings of your voice before?
I don't, and I wish I did, but my family refused to take pictures. They didn't realize, I don't have nothing of that time period.
So there's no documentation of your time not being well?
I have a box of hospital records.
But no pictures, no recordings. So it would be possible for you to see yourself. We go back to the idea of psychology and the self-fulfilling prophecy. Like you never saw yourself ill. I guess looking in the mirror when you were in recovery, but beyond that, you have no permanent record of it. So you get to define yourself however you want.
Yeah.
That's a beautiful thing.
Yeah, it is. I think my family had good foresight there.
What would you say to your family? What message do you give to your family for everything they did for you?
Without crying.
You can cry.
It's something that will always be present for me. How somebody can show up that way for you. I cannot express gratitude. That's not possible.
And it must have really driven home the impact that it makes when you show up for someone else. We know it's important, but you really know what it does. It heals.
Yeah. It allowed me to live.
It allowed you to live. It literally gave you your life, because if no one had noticed that you had life in your eyes, you might not have made it through. Wow. You said that part of the reason why you had such a miraculous recovery is because you didn't know that you weren't supposed to recover. So true. You are a fan of Abraham Hicks, as I am, and you put in your book her emotional scale, which I refer to a lot too. I love that. And at the bottom of the scale is things like fear, grief, despair, and powerlessness. And at your physical worst, you're probably feeling all of those things.
Most definitely.
So at the highest on the scale is joy, appreciation, empowerment, freedom, and love. Where would you put yourself now on the emotional scale?
Not always at the very top, but closer. And with that said, I also want to say that it's important to feel feelings. So even when you feel sad and fear, all the negative emotions, it's good to let them out of your body. Otherwise, they become trapped and more.
The way you let them out is by feeling them.
Yes.
Because they have to pass through you. And it's probably a good thing that you weren't able to express it as much. It really forced you to feel it. And that probably helped you to work through it.
You know what? I hadn't thought of that, but yeah.
Wow. Yeah, that's an interesting concept to think about. Interesting. You mentioned that gratitude is a magnifier. You obviously have a tremendous amount of gratitude for life itself, for your family, for all of the things that you've learned, for your healing. What else has gratitude magnified in you?
Good question. I think gratitude for stuff that I'm learning that appreciates always, because I was more gratitude for a connection. I get to connect with people on a deeper level.
Do you do this work now with people? What do you do for a living now?
I coach the health program they gave me.
Is it a special program?
Yeah, it's 3 months long, based on nutrition. But it's not just me saying, here's a list, do this. Because that doesn't work. That's diet, and we know the diet industry is totally broken. And so we dive into food psychology in the beginning, and then we go through a series of different things every week. Every week is a different thing they were.
So you are a coach for a specific healing protocol that involves nutrition and your relationship with food, including psychology, and then also the actual physical eating, what you would eat, what you would avoid, and whatnot. And so if anyone is dealing with healing, that is a program that you are able to help them to work through it.
Sure.
Okay. And I want to ask you where people can find you. But before I do that, I want to know the question that I ask every guest. What are your top lessons and blessings of life?
Okay, so I think the very top one is family. Then another lesson is your food matters a lot.
Yeah.
Hydration is important. Meat is not the devil.
I like meat.
So do I. So do I. But we were told it causes heart disease. That's all a lie.
You and I could probably get into a whole, if we wanted to do a little conspiracy podcast, we should, because I'm the queen of conspiracies. Just joking, but I love all that stuff, I'll tell you. And the thing is, we can joke about it being, quote, conspiracy, but there's a lot of stuff that is real. It is suppressed information. And because of various different interests, certain information is disseminated and other information is suppressed. And food is one of those things that falls under that category, because we've got the food pyramid, which is like basically the opposite of how a healthy person should actually eat. Yeah, it's very interesting.
The thing is, healthy people are not profitable. That's it.
That's
the
true.
Bottom line.
I know. It's such a shame when you look at, because I know, like, I did not experience even close to what you experienced in your health journey. But the only things that helped me were not in a part of the traditional medical system at all. The traditional medical system, really trying to think if there's anything valuable. There was some value. I do think certain things, because testing, but the testing that was recommended for me didn't come from a traditional doctor. It came from a medical doctor, an MD, but also functional medicine. So she certified both. And interestingly, I can't overstate that you have to take control of your own healing. And that comes from mind, body, and spirit, right? Yeah. Where can people find you and get in touch with you if they just want to connect, if they're curious about your coaching? Where do they go?
So since I have a bit of an allergy to social media, the best place to find me right now is on my webpage, and that would be genuinelymaria.com. And there's a way to book a free discover call if that's something you're interested in.
Beautiful. And I think that people should. And you're located in New Jersey, is that right?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Because we're close to each other. Okay, good. And we're going to have coffee one day.
Yes.
Because we're not that far. And I think we're soul sisters. Yeah. So thank you, Maria. Thanks for sharing your story. Thank you for being so genuine and authentic, hence your website, Genuinely Maria. And I think through adversity and difficult experiences, we learn authenticity. And so thank you for your authenticity, for sharing your heart, and for letting us see you and allowing yourself to be seen, because I know that pattern has repeated throughout your life. And here you are coming full circle with that. And it's a beautiful thing. So thank you so much.
Thank you.